Hello. This is my book talk on the book The Alchemist, and I am Aniya Harrison. Before we start, I wanted to include a quote from the book that I believe spoke to me. It reads, "We are afraid of losing what we have, whether it's our life or our possessions or our property. But this fear evaporates when we understand that our life stories and the history of the world were written by the same hand." This was said to Santiago by the camel driver. Now, this quote spoke to me, or I guess I could say what I took from this quote is that um, we as people naturally we fear losing anything of our possession. Now, whether we realize it or not, that fear will always stick with us, and there's really nothing we can do about having to lose certain things. The only thing we can do is either learn from it, take from it and move on, because what we don't realize is that, as in the quote it says, when we understand our life stories and the history of the world were written by the same hand, the I'm sorry, the so the quote says when we understand our life stories and the history of the world written by the same hand, it's basically saying that whether we realize it or not, our lives were already, planned out. So us losing these things were going to happen eventually, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. So once we learn and realize that, we can use that fear and not run away from it. So let's get started. The Alchemist. The Alchemist is an adventure fiction novel written by author Paulo Coelho. This is the setting and characters of the novel. The Alchemist takes place in Tarifa, the city of Tanger in North Africa, and the Sahara Desert. Some of the characters in the novel are Santiago, who is the main character, the alchemist, the crystal merchant. Um, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Mel Melchizedek, the Englishman, and Fatima, the protagonist and antagonist of the story. The protagonist would be the main character, Santiago himself. I say this because in the book, he is said to follow his dreams, and regardless of the challenges that he faces, he pushes past them and continues on his journey. The antagonist of the story isn't one person exactly. It would be anything or anyone who attempts to prevent Santiago from completing this journey. Throughout the story, he is faced with many challenges, whether it be an actual thing or a person who is discouraging him or trying to um, turn him the other way, from following his dreams. So, these are the characters of the story, just a little bit more in depth. Santiago. Santiago is a young shepherd. He is a curious boy who loves to travel. Santiago, he, throughout the story, you do see how creative he is, how curious he is, um, and how resilient he is, regardless of all of the challenges that he was thrown at, like the challenges that were thrown at him. He always found a way to push past it, or he listened to past advice from wise people. The next person would be the Englishman. Santiago met the Englishman as he was crossing the desert with a cav- car. I'm sorry. It starts with a C. It's like a caravan. I'm sorry. As he was crossing the desert with the caravan, that's just like a group of camels and people riding camels. The Englishman is actually in search of the alchemist. We'll get to him next. So the Englishman and Santiago, they meet, and they're actually very opposite of each other when it comes to the way they view the world or learn things. Santiago is one to look at the world as whole, I guess you could say. He's more with the universe and nature, while the Englishman is more into books and structure, I guess. Um, he doesn't feel like he can learn the way that Santiago learns. What Santiago learns is by watching people and just his surroundings. While the Englishman, he believes that all the knowledge he needs comes from the books that he reads. So the Alchemist. The Alchemist is a 200-year-old, um, and he resides in the Alphaeum Oasis. He is said to be very powerful. He it's in the story when him and Santiago cross paths, he takes Santiago under his wing and he teaches him about the philosophies of alchemy. He teaches him how to not only turn I believe it's iron into gold, but how to how to use his mind also. Like he teaches him how to look at things the way he has been, but to harness that power even more like greatly. Now the crystal merchant, we see him before we ever see the Englishman and the alchemist. The crystal merchant meets Santiago after he arrives in. Oh, I'm sorry, I did not finish that. I'm sorry. The merchant meets Santiago after he arrives in Egypt to in search of the pyramids. So Santiago, he ends up working for the crystal merchant, and while he is doing this, he actually helps the crystal merchant's business grow, becomes a success, and throughout the year, he's with him for a year, and he grows his business. He helps grow his business. Now, while Santiago is with the crystal merchant, this crystal merchant, he realizes that Santiago makes him realize that he himself has forgotten his journey of finding his personal legend. I'm sorry. He becomes so content with the way that life is, uh, that his business wasn't like as successful as it was with before Santiago, and that's because he was so content with the way that things were that he didn't want anything to change. He didn't want to take that risk, and he had that fear, like in the beginning we said with the quote, that fear of losing his possessions. So Santiago is like a awakening for the man, and he realizes that he he forgot his personal legend. He has never gone to find it. He ignored it, and he wishes that Santiago doesn't do the same. Now, these are the themes, or just few of the many themes that are in this book. Okay, so the first theme would be, as we were just talking about before, personal legend. Now, a personal legend is basically a person's destiny or purpose in life. This is like your, as we like with the quote from the beginning, and the quote that I used in the beginning, where I said that our lives and what happens and things like that are already planned out. This is basically like this. This is what we are looking for in our lives. You know, this is what we feel we need to find in order to feel fulfilled, I guess. This is what the universe deems as best for them or best for us. Now, some people believe in this. They choose to follow their personal legend and find it, like Santiago, and other people choose to ignore it. They're fine with the way that their life is. They don't seem to want more, or maybe they do want more, but they have that, again, that fear that's just too overcoming, and they leave it alone, like the merchant. So the piggyback off of that would be the fear of failure. Now, throughout his entire journey, Santiago faces many obstacles, as said before. A lot of these obstacles are make him reconsider even continuing on with his journey. He thinks every time that he should just go home and leave it alone because it's not worth it. So the fear of failure, some people, it's enough for them to quit, like the merchant. And I put in there to speak about the merchant, the sheep. Santiago's sheep, they, like the merchant, are so content with the way life is. In the beginning of the story, Santiago just can't wrap his head around how animals can just be okay with the way things are. They're very simple, and he can't seem to understand why they will want things to be that way. Why wouldn't they want more? And just like the sheep, the merchant is the same way. He is fine with the way things are, and he doesn't want anything else. He likes it simple. But, or maybe he doesn't. This is just, again, that fear taking over. Okay, so now I'm just going to read off a summary that I wrote for the book. Some of these include like main events in the story, but a lot of things are left out because I don't want to give away the whole book. I do believe it's a very good read, and you can learn a lot from it, a lot from this book, and that you can apply to your own life. So it reads, The Alchemist is about a young shepherd boy who has a dream about finding a treasure. In the dream, a child is telling him to travel to the pyramids to find the treasure. Santiago, the young shepherd boy, sells his flock of sheep after receiving advice from a gypsy and a man named Melchizedek. Sorry. In Tanger, he meets a crystal merchant and ends up working for him. He helps the man's business succeed. After a year, Santiago leaves the merchant and continues on his journey to his personal legend. He crosses the desert and meets the Englishman. Uh, they exchange ways of learning. As I was talking about before, this was when he was with the caravan and he met the Englishman, and in the book, they exchange ways that they learn. The Englishman reading, Santiago with observing. Santiago meets a woman named Fatima while in the oasis. Santiago is contacted by the alchemist. The alchemist contacts Santiago, and he tells him to come with him, to leave Fatima in the oasis and to come with him. Santiago and the alchemist continue to travel. Santiago finally makes it to the pyramids. I ended it there because I didn't want to give uh, the answer to the treasure yet. Because it's a really good book, so I think that you should read it in order to find out what happens when he does reach the pyramids. So in the next slide, I talk about the author himself, Paulo Coelho. Now, Paulo Coelho was born in Rio de Janeiro on August 24th, 1947. At the fun fact, actually, well, maybe not fun, but a fact about him. At the age of 17, his parents, his parents sent him to a mental institution. Um, Now, Quello, he says that according to the hospital's documents, he was seen as rebellious, and he isolated himself, and he just, to them, he needed the help. Now, Quello, he disagrees, and he says that the isolation was because he wanted to become a writer so bad. His need to become a writer was so great that he just ended up isolating himself. Whether that was on purpose or not, it happened. And according to Quello, no one understood him, like his parents, and he was sent to the institution 3 times, actually, in 3 consecutive years. So that is the end to my book talk about The Alchemist. Now, if you believe that you will read this book, here are some other books that I would recommend. One is called The Little Prince, and one is called The Kite Runner. The Kite Runner has similar writing styles to Quello. Um, one thing about Quello is that his writing style is very creative and interesting, and we can kind of, I would say it comes from him having to be in the institution, that he was forced to, make up these writing styles. He was forced, you know. Sorry. The institutions kind of force Quilo to make this writing style that he has. He's very creative. The isolation, everything had to play a part in this also. So if you do find his writing style to be very uh like drawing, like it draws you in, I would recommend The Kite Runner. So just some personal words about it. After reading The Alchemist, I would say that I've taken a lesson from this book, or quite a few. Um, I've never been one to be like the merchant, to be so content with life and the simple things. I've been more like Santiago and wanting more, to find that that purpose, to go on that journey. So I do love this book. I really do. I think it's a great read. I think people can learn a lot from it, whether they are like the merchant or whether they are like Santiago. So, thank you for listening to my book talk. I hope this has helped you in one way or another.